I'm here at the Activate conference in Newport Beach, California, and a little bit ago I met with Anthony Girarsi, who is Girarsi Law Firm, primary principal. But I'm sitting with Kevin Kim, who is our actual securities attorney. He is a partner with the law firm. And Kevin, even though you inherited us as a client from Anthony, bless your heart. One of the things that I have really enjoyed getting to know you about is your understanding of not only domestic securities law, but how we incorporate securities law and stay compliant when we're pulling in non-US investors. And so if you could share with our investors and friends a little bit about what you do to help us stay compliant.
Sure. So when A-List Partners management came to us and they said we want to do a capital raise, a fund in the United States and also raise money abroad, one of the biggest questions was how do we make sure we're compliant here in the United States as it pertains to US securities laws, but also we are protected from when we are raising money overseas. And how we do that is we use Regulation D domestically and Regulation S overseas. Regulation S is a U.S. law. It's a safe harbor that allows issuers to go overseas and raise money, and it acts as a safe harbor. And so the mechanisms are very straightforward. We call it a Reg S overlay to a Regulation D fund, and so David's fund has two components to it. In actuality, it is two offerings at once, operating under simultaneously at the same time, and that's why you'll see two document sets and you'll see two different versions, but it's the same company. And so the Regulation S portion is for their foreign piece, as when they're raising money overseas from investors who are living abroad or who qualify as non-US persons, will fall under that category. But ultimately, all the investors are still members of the A-List Partners fund that they are investing in, and so it's still considered the one master offering, so to speak. So it's a very great way to bring capital from international investors and give A-List Partners management peace of mind because they are complying with U.S. securities laws.
And so in addition to the Regulation S group of documents or subscription agreement, we have ventured out into kind of another little segue of that through the portfolio interest exemption program. And therefore, Kevin has had to create a whole nother set of documents for us to stay compliant with that. Now, Kevin, one of the questions I get asked a lot when I'm overseas working with non-US investors is that legitimately legal for them to invest in the United States and not be subject to a 30% withholding tax on the US side?
Right. It sounds too good to be true.
It does.
It really does.
Yeah.
I can invest without tax. Well, it's not that you can invest without tax. It's a very unique program that the IRS established. Really, my belief is to stimulate the U.S. economy by injecting non-U.S. investors to lend money to the United States. And so the concept in the portfolio interest exemption, or PIE, or commonly referred to as PI, is really a very narrow set of investment model. You can only invest in debt. You can only invest in debt investments. You can only be lending money to the United States. To a borrower here who's domestically, and the rules are very, very strict. And so if you follow within the rules, you can avoid the 30% withholding that you normally have on interest income. However, if you don't fall under that requirement, then you'll lose that opportunity. So it's not that it's available for all investment. It's very specific in what it is and what it requires. To talk about the details really quick, it has to be debt. So you have to be lending money to a U.S. borrower.
Which is us.
Which is you, and also the interest has to be non-contingent interest. There can't be any family relationship between the borrower in the U.S., which is you, and the non-U.S. lender or investor. And there are a handful of other requirements that are part and parcel with the regulation, and it's part of the tax code. And so after all the requirements are established and the loan is made, when interest payments are made, they are not subject to the traditional withholding on interest income that a lender would have to be subject to. And so it's a very powerful means of investment, very popular with non-US investors from very financially savvy groups. It's a lot. I'm seeing a lot of interest in it, and A-List Partners have been very successful in their efforts to promote and educate their investors about it. And so I encourage many people start looking into it. So it's a good opportunity.
And then one last question. As you well know, when we organized A-List Partners Regional Center, which is our newest fund, we organized it as a regional center so that we could work with EB5 investors. So how does that impact domestic investors, or does it have any impact at all other than more profitability to the fund for domestic investors? And then explain why we have to be so compliant with setting up a one project security just for the EB5 investors.
Right, and so we'll go backwards in the question and answer there. So the EB5 piece is, EB5 requires a investment into a job creating entity, and typically speaking, it's per project, and so it can't be done on what you see out there as kind of the fund, a kind of a pooled asset fund. It really doesn't work for that, because the pooled asset has to be, the asset that's being invested in has to be creating jobs. The EB5 visa program requires job creation. And so in EB5, in the EB5 industry, you'll see single purpose entities being created as the new commercial entity, or NCE, raising money and then deploying it to the job creating entity as the investment. And so that is why the regional center has to create individual projects and individualized subsidiaries and or affiliated programs, because it's required under the EB5 program. Now, talking about how it impacts their domestic investors, the beauty behind the EB5 visa program as it stands is that it is a great opportunity for injecting capital in the United States and creating jobs, but also a great way to support construction projects and development projects and projects that create larger returns than your typical loan would on the private lending market. And so development has a longer lifetime, but the returns are substantially sizable. And so I think from a U.S. investment perspective, it allows them to diversify beyond just investing in a traditional mortgage fund that only invests in loans. And so it does allow for that. As it applies to the regional center and the domestic side, regional center is still a business, and it's still an operator, and a lot of the regional centers out there are acting as developers, and they are sponsoring projects and working with sponsors to get these projects done. And so I actually wonder why more of them don't are trying to work with investors to build their brand and do the things that A-List Management and is doing with a regional center as compared to some of the other regional centers out there. So.
Well, very good then. And we appreciate you being
no problem.
On top of us. You have corrected me many a time on some legal points, and I appreciate that, because I want to stay completely above the law and very compliant with the law. And so you've been a very instrumental force.
Not a problem. Of course, we love to help, and we really wish A-List Partners Management all the success in the world, and we're very excited for things to come.
So thank you, Kevin.
No problem.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.